Thanks for joining me on the Rise and Fall of Easterfest. I'm Justin Rouillon. If you haven't listened to the first few episodes of this series, make sure you jump back to the beginning to get the full picture on how Easterfest rose from humble beginnings to become one of Queensland's major events. And if you want to get a big dose of nostalgia vibes, check out the link in the show notes to our Spotify playlist. We've got all the artists lined up from over the years at Easterfest for you to enjoy. In this episode, we'll be looking at the fall and how Easterfest became another casualty of the music festival business. It's Easter Saturday 2011 and Easterfest CEO Isaac Moody's riding high. This year is the biggest event ever. The campsite is at capacity with overflow campers based at the Toowoomba Showgrounds, and Queen's Park is pumping with Easterfest's biggest ever crowd. Saturday headliners Switchfoot, New World Sun and Peter Furler are ready to spark the massive crowd into action. And for the first time ever, the event has made budget before the gates were thrown open. And the weather is fantastic, with the Easter Saturday basking under clear blue skies.
It was going so well. Record ticket sales. You're always worried about, can you pay for this thing? Because it's millions of dollars and will people buy enough? But that year, there was enough tickets sold and we'd actually covered the costs about a week before the event, like first time ever. And so it was sold out, packed out, great vibe, great weather.
Only a few months before, Isaac and his team weren't even sure what the 2011 festival would look like after southeast Queensland experienced some of the worst flooding in decades.
Of all the images from the unfolding flood crisis in Queensland, the scenes from central Toowoomba today were among the most dramatic.
A flash flood described as a river tsunami has swept through the town, killing at least 4 people.
Stood on the roof of that building behind me and watched the cars float down the road, watched the houses.
Downstream in the town of Grantham, helicopters have plucked dozens of people clinging to their roofs as 7-metre wall of water rushed through.
They will require a pick-up by helicopter ASAP. They're on the roof and the structure is collapsing.
An inland tsunami which formed in the streets of Toowoomba raced down the Great Dividing Range, literally washing away the towns of Grantham and Whithcott that were no match for a 7-metre high wall of water. Tragically, a number of Toowoomba residents were killed, along with 12 people in Grantham. Across Queensland, the state was flooding, with the capital Brisbane going under for the first time since 1974. In the aftermath of that tragedy, the community was able to come together and grieve, and ultimately, by the time that Easter rolled around, there was a sense of hope in the air. Dan Serkin was a journalist with Win Television in Toowoomba and was also involved with PR for the festival, as well as on camera with Easterfest TV. He said that by the Easter of 2011, the city was still coming to terms with the recent flooding events across Toowoomba, the Lockyer Valley and southeast Queensland.
The city was on edge after the events of January, when the flooding, I guess, went through town. It was catastrophic. It was devastating. And obviously what happened in Grantham was a nightmare. I guess the city was still reeling after those events by the time Easter came around. So that was sort of sitting in the background of what had happened. And I obviously had been involved in the reporting of the different events. It was a very significant time for that whole region because it wasn't just Toowoomba and Grantham. The whole region had been flooding, and obviously Brisbane had flooded as well. So it was very significant for the whole region.
And then the festival happened a few months later, and it was so wonderful for the city because the city had just been pretty traumatised. No one in Toowoomba expected a literal inland tsunami of water to come through our CBD. And the festival was like this moment of hope and fantastic, and it was all just going so well.
For event director Dave Schenk, Easter Saturday 2011 was the peak of years of work, with a clear vision on future growth for the festival. The campground was full. In fact, it was overflowing.
So we also had another 500-ish from memory camping out at the showgrounds with buses. The original plan when we first did that was, well, that could be an extension going into, we could put thousands out there in the future as a growth plan.
I can remember that afternoon. It was a beautiful day. There were so many people in at Queen's Park for the event. Switchfoot was set to play, which now the big draw card band. And I can remember just walking around thinking, wow, this is really huge. Like, this is massive. We haven't seen the festival this big before.
As Peter Furler is preparing to take the stage, a small cloud appears, in stark contrast to the clear blue skies Easterfest has enjoyed all day. And as the crowd enjoys the set from the former Newsboys frontman, that cloud begins to grow.
I felt on top of the world, and I remember going onto the main stage to say something just after Peter Furler had done a set, and Switchfoot was about to come on, and I came off the stage and a drop of water hit me on my head, and I had a little bit of hair back then, I don't anymore, and I went, oh, where's that? And we had this whole call centre, emergency sort of communications crew, and I dialed into them. I said, what's going on with rain? They said, no, there's nothing predicted. There's a small little cloud spot over Queen's Park.
My name's Mick Kerr. I was volunteering with Easterfest back in 2011, and on Saturday, Easter Saturday, I was helping to production manage the Vision radio stage, which was where we used to hold all of the press conferences and like all of the media interviews for the artists. We also had bands on the stage that night, and so on the afternoon and evening of the Saturday, we were getting ready for the lineup for the different bands that were going to be playing that night. And I do remember having a conversation with Dave Shank that afternoon, and there was the crew tent where everybody went back and we'd have our meals together, and we were standing just outside the crew tent and outside the green room, I think it was, and we could see off in the distance there was this cloud. Looked like a sort of bit of a storm cloud over in the distance. But I do remember standing with Dave and looking at that cloud and going, or both of us sort of going, do you reckon it's going to hit us? You reckon that's coming this way? And we're looking at the radar and it's this little dot on the radar. There's nothing really to look at. And sort of looking at it and looking how it was tracking, it sort of looked like it was going to go north, so pass by Toowoomba. And sure enough, that little cloud turned into the absolute deluge that washed the festival out.
This is Dan Sercombe.
I was working on Easterfest TV with my brother-in-law, who was the cameraman and the editor, and we had our own little dongle sort of office there near main stage, sort of looking towards the big entry tent. And I can remember seeing a big dark cloud sort of coming from the west in our direction, not thinking a huge amount of it. I remember looking on the bureau, the radar, and it was very small, but it was sort of heading in our direction, and it did look quite ominous. And it just got bigger and bigger. And I can remember it started to rain, and I was thinking, well, this is going to pass very quickly. This is just a small little cell that's not even, it's not even covering Toowoomba. But it didn't move, and it bucketed down. Like, it just came down in a short period of time with such intensity that I hadn't seen in the CBD for, I don't think, ever. And I was sitting in my office looking outside, and, you're always thinking it's going to move on, it's going to stop raining, but it didn't. And it progressively got worse, and because it's sort of on a hill, the water just started gushing down, and it became mayhem.
This is Isaac Moody.
Ended up being this little supercell storm, which is a freak event. Most of Toowoomba didn't get wet, but Queen's Park, over the next 20 minutes, got a deluge. And so Toowoomba had been on the national news that year because of this inland tsunami, and we got an event like that. Now, fortunately, because it wasn't right across the whole city, we didn't get that same huge amount of water through the CBD, but we did get a lot of water through Queen's Park, and it caused some pretty major issues. So for those who are there, will remember our big entrance tent split in half, and the top of the tent started filling with water. This is a tent that was, I think, 8,000 square metres, a big tent, about 20 metres high, and it started to bulge and fill with water. And I remember seeing that going, and we had to emergency get somebody with a knife to split the tent, and it ripped the whole tent in half. A huge amount of water, about 20 tonne of water came down through the whole, like artist merchandise. It was just a disaster.
It was very confronting to see that main tent collapse, the fabric break right over the green room area, thinking those tents are huge. When they're setting up people walk on that fabric, it can take a lot of weight. So there was a massive amount of water just sitting up there, and it just busted. It just couldn't get away fast enough. That's how heavy it was raining. So it was catastrophic. It was a very bad event because obviously everyone's pretty nervy, particularly locals. I can remember hearing the sirens of the fireys and looking at East Creek that runs just sort of along the park there and seeing the Swiftwater rescue crews standing on the bridge waiting to see if they needed to get anyone out of the creek, because it was hammering down, and tragically there had been lives lost at the start of the year. So they were on high alert. The whole area was it was filling up with water. So it was a very dangerous event. Like the amount of electricity cables, the amount of water, and having a creek running through that was flowing that fast. It was not a great situation for anyone to be in, and it was pretty terrifying, really.
Event director Dave Schenk.
We were hit with 100 mil of rain in a 40-minute period, and then more rain, after that for hours as well. We evacuated the site, and the water built up and tore apart the front entry tent. It was certainly one of the more memorable nights of my life. A little traumatic.
Former Easterfest audio tech Mick Kerr.
When it happened, I was over on the vision stage, so we were preparing for what would happen after the main stage set. We had a couple of bands lined up to do acoustic sets after the main stage set, so we were prepping for that and getting ready to go. And then you sort of start to notice the rain come down. We were scrambling on our stage because there was a lot of equipment that was on the ground. Talking like amplifiers and lighting dimmers and things like that. So we were, as the rain was coming down and as the water was starting to puddle under the stage and things were starting to get deeper, we were scrambling to get power cables and dimmers and amplifiers up off the ground and onto the stage to try and make sure that things weren't damaged and to try and keep the place safe. But in terms of like my memories after that night, it was pretty blurry. Like, to be honest, it was pretty traumatic.
Emery were an American hardcore band who were scheduled to perform on the Easter Saturday night. Their set was cancelled, with the band telling their YouTube audience in 2020 that the night was absolute chaos.
I was nervous that we wouldn't get out. I mean, it was calf deep.
It was terrifying. I thought we were done. Yeah, and so we were just sitting there, and the wind picks up, and the rain comes, and then the catering tent was gone. And it's like, wasn't it? And it's like you thought the structures were about to start. You hear about it at Fest. I mean, it could have easily, the wind was there, and then the water, it rained. It was dry before that. We were uphill a little bit, but the flat ground that was not collecting water, and they were falling so fast that the water couldn't even get off of the flat ground. And it was like, it was over your ankles of just dumped water that was
very quickly.
That was it wasn't even like it was accumulating. It was just literally falling so fast that it was just sitting on the ground. And then the river started rolling over, and then whatever. The rest of the night it was just like waiting to see if the banks are going to overflow and what buildings are going to go or whatever. It was terrifying.
My friends, how are you feeling? I have never seen anything like this.
By the time Switchfoot is supposed to play, the rain was torrential, with the audience immediately in front of the stage now wading in a significant amount of water. While the rest of Queen's Park was being evacuated, Dave Schenk and his team have doubts whether they should let Switchfoot take the stage, but the Californian headliners were having none of it.
Switchfoot ended up being the last act to perform in the teeming rain. They were desperate to perform. We said, like, we don't think we can do it. And they just were begging us, please let us go on. Even if we just play for an hour, like, we want to go and play to these guys who've hung out in this rain. So there's a few thousand left at main stage. The rest of the site had been evacuated. And, of course, we were dealing with emergency services and trying to find people who could take in kids whose campsites had been utterly destroyed until, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning.
This is former event manager Linda Monteith.
I must have come over the radio or something, say, can someone get Switchfoot to stage? And I was like, I'll do it. And so I got them out of the bus and we sloshed through all the water up to the stage and off they went to play. And that was the best place for them. And it was an amazing show. And people were so sad they couldn't get back in because they'd left site and then they couldn't come back in. But the people that were there still talk about it being one of the most amazing shows they've ever seen.
Easterfest CEO Isaac Moody.
We kept the Switchfoot concert going because it was the safest way to contain about 10,000 people watching that who were in waist-deep water. And there was major risk with, all the electricity and everything was underwater. And then it broke into national news that this had happened, and it looked horrific with this big tent split in half.
This is Dan Sercombe.
Because of my journalist experience, I was looking at the events transpire, and I can remember going home and I got a phone call from my brother-in-law, who's Isaac Moody's brother, family connections, and he said, "Oh, mate, how bad was it?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, it was pretty bad." But he said news.com.au is reporting that the main stage collapsed. And I said, "Oh, really?" And I can remember I got off the phone to him and I had to make a decision I was like, well, I'd been helping Easterfest out with some of their media stuff, but I called up news.com.au and I went straight to the newsroom and I said, that's not actually what's happened. You need to correct that. Main stage didn't collapse. There was damage to a tent, but not main stage.
The festival could not get up and running again that night. Like it was in a major mess. That year we had 7,500 campers in Queen's Park, and they all tried to call their parents. And the telecommunications towers collapsed, both with Optus and Telstra, with the load, and Vodafone at the time. And so nobody could get out, nobody could get in. We couldn't do emergency management properly because we couldn't use our mobiles. And I remember the police commissioner of Queensland ringing me. We'd just broken into national news, and he gave me a call after it. And he said, Isaac, we have 3,500 missing reported people. This is campers and kids and, all this. Parents are in panic because of the Toowoomba footage earlier in the year. And we're not going to declare them as missing because if we do, it'll be the single biggest emergency situation in Australia's history. We think they're all going to be okay, but because the telecommunication towers are all down, we can't contact them. And he told me that they're not logging them as missing, which is probably the wise thing to do. So I didn't get any sleep that night.
Remember those words, unity and community, that kept floating around whenever Easterfest is mentioned? The 2011 floods, despite the disaster it was, showed off the Easterfest community at its best. The Toowoomba churches leapt into action, housing and feeding thousands of displaced campers who'd literally had their campsites washed away. And Mick Kerr remembers one particular act of kindness shown to the volunteers and techs who were trying to come to terms with what had just happened.
I was soaked, absolutely cold. The coat that I had on, the jacket I had on was soaked through. I had a beanie on that was wet. But people will remember the YWAM chai tent where you could go and chill out and have a chai. And one of the best things was the YWAM guys coming around with trays of hot chai at 1 o'clock in the morning when everybody is just, they've had it. They're doing their best to keep going and to keep things plugging away, but coming around with a tray of hot chai and being able to put your hands around that and have something warm in your belly, that sticks out as a just one of those moments in the middle of everything that was going on that was like, oh yeah, okay, I needed that.
The next day, it's clear that the festival can't get back up and running in the park. It's carnage with partially collapsed tents, mud and standing water everywhere. And it's nowhere near being safe enough to let thousands of festival goers back on site.
I wandered down to main stage on the Sunday morning after all that flooding, and you had a water line along a fence or on the crowd barrier right at the front of stage. The water line was just above a metre high. So I don't know at what point it got that high, but I assume that there was still a few thousand people standing in that at some point.
But this is show business, and the show must go on. The program was rescheduled and a decision made to move some of the headline artists into the Toowoomba CBD, with a pop-up concert featuring New World Sun, the Paul Coleman Trio, and Naturally Seven.
When we got back the next morning, it was like, well, now what? And I already had text messages. I had text messages from the amazing Jim Aspromorgus, who was one of the local businessmen. Amongst his businesses were the production arm. And he had built our little stage right down next to the library down near Grand Central for us on Saturday. That was planned. We had bands playing down there all day. He had texted me in the morning just to say, whatever you need, it's yours. Do you want me to go and rebuild that stage so you can move some bands down there? Won't charge you anything today. Stage, sound, production, anywhere, whatever you want is yours. Grand Central had reached out and said, look, what are you guys doing? Do you want to put some bands back in here on the Sunday, which hadn't been planned? And that kind of snowballed. We reached out to some of the venues we'd done things with in the city. Some of them reached out to us. And our incredible team, our guest relations team who are managing all the logistics, particularly of our more headline artists, our artist team reaching out to all of the bands that were scheduled to play that day. I'm not sure there was a single band that was meant to play on the Sunday that didn't play somewhere. Some of them played in a cafe instead of on a stage for 2,000 people, but I don't think a single band didn't get rescheduled.
This is the then Toowoomba Mayor Peter Taylor speaking to Dan Sercombe on Easterfest TV ahead of that concert.
What we are witnessing here in this CBD stage really is historic. There are thousands and thousands of people crammed in here to see all the bands. I'm here with the Mayor Peter Taylor of Toowoomba Regional Council. This is exciting, isn't it?
It is. I always said when I was elected I wanted to see a little bit of life in the city, but I didn't know it was going to be caused by a thunderstorm.
Something good has come out of this, hasn't it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, this is how you turn a negative into a positive, isn't it? Just keep on. Come on, let's go. This is the spirit of Toowoomba, the spirit of Aussies.
The show that happened downtown with it was New World Sun, Paul Coleman Trio, and Naturally Seven. That was crazy. Like, that space probably realistically should have held maybe 1,000 people. But the police showed up, closed the roads. There were people standing up on the roof of Grand Central watching it from the roof there. And the police estimate was that we had 7,000 people in that space. And the atmosphere is just something you could never actually create because it was all built on what we'd gone through the night before together. So that was amazing. Could never forget that day.
Dan Sercombe.
It was remarkable down in the CBD, and it was a wonderful outcome considering how serious the event was the night before and how the people responded, because the park obviously was in no state to have people in it after that. And just to see people respond and the CBD fill up and for there to be a celebration still go ahead. And the atmosphere was electric. It really was. I think it was Naturally Seven, I think I saw in that area, and looking up and just seeing people standing up on top of Grand Central and just, a wonderful, wonderful event to have seen that still go ahead. It was great for the city. It was a great outcome considering, how difficult the night before had been.
Despite the carnage of Saturday night, Easterfest 2011 still wound up as a financial success because of the sheer number of people who came through the gates. Because
we'd paid for the festival, it was actually pretty financially, we got through. It was a good year. We made a small surplus, which is good, but a very, very different experience. But what was amazing is that nobody had a major injury. No one was hurt. There were tens of thousands of people on site at the time, and so I'm just very thankful for that. But I got to say, if I hear heavy rain still to this day, the best part of 13 years later, it does go through my mind. I'm not sure if I have PTSD from heavy rain events, but that was a wild experience.
The 2011 festival was to be Isaac's last as CEO, but not because of the events of that Saturday night. That decision had been made well before the event. But Easter Saturday in 2011 was the top of the mountain, and although it wasn't the edge of the cliff, the Easterfest team would never again be able to match the crowd size of that year. This is former Easterfest event manager Linda Monteith.
And after that, the numbers did decline, sort of sequentially from there. We thought we could explain it away and maybe reboot it the following year, but it just never seemed to come back. We saw a decline in church youth groups attending, and part of that was to do with the change in the generation, whereas people were leaving it later and later to purchase tickets. There was more of a leave it to the last minute. If it's raining, we won't come. If I get a better offer, I'll go do something else. So people weren't as committed to turning up and being part of it. I think we were always hopeful that year would be the one that would change and we'd get the growth. But they just never turned around. We always thought at the festival the people would turn up. The ones that had left it to the last minute to buy would tip the tails at the tickets on that weekend. They just didn't come, even no matter what we did.
Event director Dave Schenk.
We just never recovered. From there, numbers-wise, we were largely in decline, and we just couldn't quite get a break. The following year, it didn't rain at all. But in 2013, it rained again. We got some decent rain on the Sunday. Big storms came through on the Sunday. Then in 2014, again, I don't think I dropped a rain during the actual festival itself. And anyone who was there in the last year will remember that it just drizzled away all weekend, So it was kind of like every time you felt like you were just starting to, maybe we could recover from this, it's like it would rain again the next year and everybody would be like, oh, that's right, it's not always that fun, camping in the rain.
When we come back, it becomes clear that the writing's on the wall for Easterfest, and we'll ask the question, could the festival, or something similar, return and give a whole new generation the same experience? That's shortly on the Rise and Fall of Easterfest. We're back on the Rise and Fall of Easterfest. The events of Easter Saturday night in 2011 was the beginning of the end for Easterfest, and despite a strong lineup in 2012 that included the likes of Michael W. Smith, Mercy Me, Hawk Nelson, New Empire and POD, the impact of the previous year's disaster was immediate. Ticket sales dropped dramatically, with the number of campers down by over 50%. This is Dave Schenk.
The following year, and we know for sure, there's no doubt in my mind that it was largely because of the campers' terrifying experience of that Saturday night. The following year we had 2,000 campers, which is just indicative of the impact that had on people's. It was a terrifying night for many people, and so it hurt us, and we never really recovered from that. I think we put on some incredible. I think some of the best festivals we ever ran were in the years after that. But in terms of numbers and obviously flow-on effect of numbers is dollars, we never really recovered from that day. And it just feels like you could pick the moment that we peaked. We'd had 2 perfectly sunny days, not a cloud in the sky that weekend, and then I'm going to say about 7 o'clock on that Saturday night, as New World Sun started to play, and I actually have that show on video still to this day, and Joel out there dancing on the catwalk in the ridiculously torrential rain, from there it kind of all snowballed, and we just never recovered.
Dan Sercombe noticed a shift in the market around music festivals, which wasn't just confined to Easterfest. In the 12 months either side of the final Easterfest in 2015, there were a number of other Australian music festivals consigned to the history books. During that time, festivals like Stereosonic and the iconic Big Day Out were all axed due to low ticket sales. The legendary Australian promoter Michael Gudinski told the online publication themusic.com.au that it was simply too expensive to host a good festival, following the cancellation of his travelling Future Festival in 2015.
Whether it was the appetite was starting to shift within people willing to do the drive up from Brizzy or from other parts, the cost to run an event, and even just getting artists over from America and from other parts of the world, it was challenging. I think Dave really was trying to, he's got so many different connections and different people he was able to call upon because of his relationships and his skills in that area. But it was hard. It was hard work to get people to turn up and buy a ticket. It just became increasingly challenging. And I think the lineups that Dave was able to secure were good, but it was almost like there was a shift in the desire or a lack thereof for live music in a festival format.
That 2011 experience and that's kind of rain every second year after that was a big problem. But, you can go back to that season and there were heaps of festivals all over the world and here in Australia that folded during that kind of those few years. The market was ridiculously oversaturated and that was a factor as well. That affected us just like it affected many others. And so, it's never just one thing. It's that perfect storm. We could have ridden this out or that out, but we couldn't ride it all out together. Dan Circum, he was often doing MC duties on main stage and involved in our Easterfest TV stuff. He was a part of a project to do a kind of video documentary about Easterfest. And so they followed me around and other team members. What was interesting was it captured by accident some of those challenges. In that we finished 2014 a little bit uncertain.
This is Dan Circum.
I mean, I don't know the all the ins and outs of how much money was on the line there, but look, I remember Mark Freeman. These are really top blokes. Well, there's a team of on the board that was working with Dave, and the whole team, like Joy Argo, the way that they were investing in this event and just trying to pull it together on a shoestring budget was quite remarkable. And the number of volunteers that are involved, the people that would give up their time, not just on that weekend or the weeks leading up, but through the year to make sure it ran. They were punching above their weight. So I think the culture was really good there, and it was a big risk. There were big risks taken. Anytime you put on an event like that and you've got thousands of people coming, it's risky.
I finished up after 2013. I ended up getting burnout from my 13 years in event management, so I had to step away.
Former event manager Linda Monteith.
But I did come and help on those last two festivals just because they couldn't keep me away. But I can imagine it was hard. I was still involved. I was still very good friends with Joy Argo, so we talked a lot through it. But it was very hard for the team. But we did see the writing on the wall, even back in 2013. So the fact that it kept going for 2 more years after that was a testament to the team.
At the conclusion of the 2014 festival, which featured artists as diverse as Jars of Clay, DJ Madge, the OC Supertones and Whiteheart, it was clear that Easterfest was going to have to make some tough decisions as to the future of the event.
There were some massive conversations post 2014 with the board and all our key team. In the end, staff took voluntary pay cuts to say, we want to go one more time. Let's see if we can turn this thing around. So staff were taking voluntary pay cuts. Suppliers who were, some of the suppliers who were really invested in what we were about were, helping us out massively. And all right, okay, well, because of all of that, we can have another go. Let's see what we can do in 2015, whether we can turn that around.
Once again, the weather was not kind to Toowoomba, as former festival director Dave Schenk recalls.
I wonder whether if it hadn't rained, if we'd had that great weekend in 2014 with no rain, and if it just hadn't rained again in 2015, it's, like I say, maybe silly to put anything down to just one factor. But 2015 was an incredible year, and 2014 was an incredible year. And if we'd been able to build on that, if all the day trippers that usually came had come because it wasn't raining, I wonder, maybe we could have gone again and turned it around. So you could see it in 2014, big calls made to go again in 2015.
During that 2015 festival, as the rain kept falling, it became clear to the Easterfest board that the festival was now in its final days.
And it was the Saturday night of Easterfest 2015 that I was asked to join a board meeting. And basically the decision was made, look, it's not 100%. It makes sense to unravel this a little bit after the fact, make sure we see how everything rolls out, but we're pretty sure we're done. And I fought in that meeting. When I say I fought, it was civil, but there were some who felt it was better to wait and not say anything about that on the weekend because it might prove not to be true. What if it ends up we find a way to go forward? So I certainly understood that reasoning, but I fought really hard. This is a community, this event has become such a community for so many people. I said, I really think we should get up tomorrow morning and let everyone know so that they know that they could be enjoying the last day of Easterfest. And eventually the board was supportive of that idea. And we got up on that Sunday morning. It was one of the hardest things I ever did to announce that we were pretty sure that it was all over.
This is Dave Schenk speaking with Scotty McDonald on Easterfest TV on what would end up being Easterfest's final day.
Well, let's talk seriously. As a statement you made this morning as part of worship, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen it out on Facebook. Yeah. And I suppose that it doesn't have a definitive result. It's a statement that just says, hey, here's the deal. We have had a rough few years with attendance at Easterfest. Is there a definitive result? What is the statement saying?
No, I don't think the answer to your question is no. It's not definitive because we don't know what God's plan is, you know? We don't know for sure what God's planning.
So the truth is that we are looking at there may not be an Easterfest 2016, and that's the reality?
It is. Yeah, look, it is. That is definitely a possibility. The simple fact is, look, we were looking at it. The truth is we couldn't sell tickets to next year's festival with any integrity.
Right.
You know, so there's already an ad on the back of the program. Like every year we sell tickets to the next year's festival. Bottom line is that we couldn't do that with any integrity this year. So we also knew that the second we took them off sale and somebody went to buy one, which usually tends to happen on the Sunday, people will go, yeah, great, let's get our ticket for next year, cheapest possible price, all of that. That if we hadn't said anything, then people were going to start asking questions. What's going on? Why aren't they selling tickets? Is it all over? And we're like, and there was some discussion amongst us as a team about whether do we say something? Do we not say something? Do we really even know anything to say?
Yeah.
And I guess in the end, the reason we said have come out and said what we said is because we don't consider our crowd to be our customers. It's just not what Easterfest is like. This is family. This is our festival, not my festival or just the board's festival or the team's festival. It's our festival. It's been all about community forever. I say it time and time again. We can ask people why they come to Easterfest over and over again, and Switchfoot will get mentioned once in 100 times.
Yeah.
But community will get mentioned by nearly everybody.
Yeah.
And so that's what this has become about. And I said, how can we not take our family on this journey with us? Unfortunately, in anything, your hardcore fans, like that really core group of your biggest supporters, are very rarely going to be enough to make anything successful. They're the most important, but they're not enough on their own, But for those people, man, Sunday is quite surreal for me, my memories of that Sunday, just walking around the site and being constantly stopped by people kind of expressing disbelief. Are you sure it can't be saved? What can we do? And thanks so much for, if it does turn out that it can't be, then thanks so much. It's been amazing, On the Sunday evening, when I was out on stage for what would be the last time, getting to talk to the crowd, people were literally throwing money on stage. You could probably add it up to $27.30. It's hardly going to make the difference. But the what was behind that was just so emotional. People were like, "Here, take what I've got. Like, we've got to save this thing." But yeah, I think lots of discussions happened after 2015 about, for sure, do we kill it? Is it done, or can we go again?
The obvious question after the 2015 festival was, could the event continue, but perhaps in a smaller format?
We absolutely could have gone again. We could absolutely have run another great festival, but by then we were stuck in that downward spiral. So to go again, we would have had to cut things. We would have had to cut the budget for artists. We would have had to cut budgets and maybe pull out that stage. And then, of course, the next year would have felt to people like, we've gone down. And so you just end up in that downward spiral. And really the decision in the end was, it's been an amazing 17 years. I got to be a part of 10 of those, and they're 10 of the best years of memories I have. It's been an amazing 17 years. But let's go out strong. Let's finish while it still feels amazing. Let's not watch this thing that has been incredible kind of slowly decline, and then our last memories of it are not that amazing thing.
Former CEO Isaac Moody said that Easterfest could have battled on, but he's certain that one global event would have finished it off.
At the end, I wasn't directly involved in the last 3 years. I was just a supporter and an attendee and wanted to champion the people who were doing it. And it was tough for them. But I think it had run its course. Financially, it's getting a bit difficult. Weather was a challenge. I don't think it would have survived COVID. These things are often a blessing. And when I look back to an era like that, I look back with great memories and I think it's fondness, but it's good to not hold on to things because there's great things happening across Australia and Brisbane and everywhere, right around the world. And it's always great to be involved with what's next. And that's not to detract from what's been, but it's like an acknowledgement of the past with an excitement of the future.
Keeping music festivals afloat in Australia has always been challenging, and while some genre-specific events like CMC Rocks and the Good Things Festival have remained popular with fans, there's been a string of festivals lost over the years. Even the long-running Splendour in the Grass was cancelled last year, only a week after tickets had gone on sale for that year's event. Splendour was one of Australia's biggest festivals, attracting headliners like Coldplay, The Strokes, Gorillaz and Lorde, and they recently announced that Splendour would again not be taking place in 2025. The Woodford Folk Festival is another one of Queensland's biggest events, and Amanda Jacks, their managing director, told online publication The Music that the event was at risk of collapse just a few years ago, following an audience decline of around 34% after their 2023-24 festival. Byron Bay's annual Blues Fest is another behemoth of the Australian festival scene, who'll be calling it quits after their 2025 event, bringing an over 30-year dynasty to a close. Although, as we record this episode, Blues Fest promoter Peter Noble has hinted that they will be trying to go again next year. Creative Australia have reported that more than one-third of Australian music festivals lost money in the 2022-23 financial year, with the biggest challenges being rising operational costs and the skyrocketing rates of public liability and event cancellation insurance. Tony Moore is a Sunshine Coast session drummer who was involved in the production crew with Easterfest.
Cost is a factor, but if you actually look, people aren't buying tickets. So normally what a festival will do is they'll go, here's our festival, it's happening now, there's a pre-sale in 4 weeks' time, and unless they get 60-70% sales, they're shutting it down because they know it will. They're not going to fight for tickets for the next 12 months or 6 months because they know it's not going to happen if they haven't, bitten it straight away.
As we've mentioned, promoters have been hammered with skyrocketing costs. And that report that we mentioned from the arts investment and advisory body Creative Australia also found out that young people are no longer the sector's primary demographic. Aside from the generational change, Australian festival organisers said that rising operational costs was the biggest challenge facing them, alongside overheads like artist fees, production costs, freight, and of course insurance proving particularly challenging. In reporting from the ABC, it's estimated that live music venues' public liability insurance has increased tenfold over the past few years. Festivals haven't been immune from that either, with a number of promoters stating that things like event cancellation insurance costs have doubled since the pandemic. Easterfest was exposed to all of that risk even 10 years ago, with the obvious lack of one income stream hurting the bottom line. This is Easterfest event manager Linda Monteith.
Well, I think part of the reason other festivals succeeded and Easterfest didn't, it was to do with the fact that non-faith-based festivals, they gained most of their income from alcohol sales. And that just wasn't obviously an income stream we had access to. And festivals are frighteningly expensive. I can't imagine what they cost now. And the insurance on them, oh my goodness, that would break your heart.
Isaac Moody says that the festival business model is a difficult one to sustain year in and year out.
Well, the first thing you've got to know, it's a terrible business model, and don't do it unless you really want to put yourself through a bit of pain and suffering. It is rewarding as well, but you're exactly right. You rely on earning for one weekend of the year, and you spend for 52 weeks of the year, but you also spend a lot, obviously, on the weekend that you earn.
Easterfest also differed from their contemporaries in that the festival was set up as a not-for-profit.
What that means is that any money or profit it made had to be invested back into it. It couldn't go to individuals in a profit-sharing pot, but it still had to pay the bills. Otherwise, we wouldn't exist. And so it was really tricky. Ticket sales would cover about half the costs. And then we'd rely on generous support and sponsorship and partnerships with organisations like 96.5 or Coorong Bookstore was just wonderful in those early days, as well as numerous organisations, the Bible Society and Home Ice Cream, which was a Toowoomba company. They were fantastic as well in helping financially undergird it. It also reached major event status for Queensland, which meant that it got reasonably significant Queensland government money. Other major events in Queensland were the Indie on the Gold Coast or Woodford Folk Festival at the time, and Easterfest was one of them. So we did receive some significant government support as well. But then on top of all of that, sponsorship and ticket sales and government support, we would have an incredible pool of volunteers who would give into it as well. We'd employ a core team, I think it was about 6 or 7 full-time staff all year to work on it, and then a crew of thousands, mostly volunteers on the weekend itself or in the weeks setting up, and somehow it all worked. And so back then, 20 years ago, I guess it would have had a budget of, it'd be in the millions, maybe in today's money, 5 or 6 million, and you might break even or you might make $50,000 surplus, and it was pretty touch and go. It'd keep us on our knees.
By May 2015, just 5 weeks after Easterfest had wrapped up failing to meet budget, a decision had been made to end the festival. The Easterfest era officially came to an end on Friday, May 15, when the Easterfest board made the decision public, sharing the following statement with media and the wider festival family via their Facebook page.
After 17 years of high-quality music festivals, the Easterfest board has announced the end of an era. It's with great sadness that I announce on behalf of the team that Easterfest will not run again in 2016, said board chairman Tony Gear. This has been the most difficult decision we've had to make, and we understand it will take time for the Easterfest family to process this news. Like many other music festivals around the world, Easterfest has seen a slow decline in crowd numbers over recent years. We desperately wanted to find a way forward after this year's festival. In recent weeks, we've looked at all the options, we've considered all the factors, and come to the conclusion that this current event model isn't sustainable, said Mr. Gear. Event director Dave Shank has been overwhelmed at the outpouring of support. It's been incredible to receive so many offers of assistance from all of the people who have made this festival such a great event. Easterfest has become a family to us and many others, and we would like to take this opportunity to thank those who have given so much over the past 17 years. Easterfest has been an iconic event in Toowoomba and was recently identified by the state government as one of Queensland's major events. We love Toowoomba and want to thank the community for letting us hold such a significant event in the centre of such a beautiful city, said Mr. Shank. We hope the financial and social benefits of Easterfest will continue into the future. Easterfest was a celebration at Easter, about Easter, and we can only give glory to God for what has unfolded at this festival. It has been a privilege to gather with thousands of people to celebrate and remember the life, death and resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Dave Shank said that the decision to not let the event die a slow death protected all of the festival stakeholders.
There was recently an article in the Toowoomba Chronicle about the loss of Easterfest. I foolishly went and read some of the comments on the Chronicle Facebook page. I should know better than that from back in the day. There's always going to be complainers, right? But one person had said, I wonder whether the people who'd already bought tickets for the next year ever saw their money back, and I wonder how many suppliers didn't get paid or whatever. And okay, I know that can sometimes be the case when these things happen. But I want to go on record and say that every single person who had tickets before we realised that probably we were selling tickets to something that wouldn't happen and stopped selling them got a refund. And every single supplier was paid in full to the detriment. In the end, the last portion of that after where the Easterfest's money ran out was paid out of the pockets of our directors, because that was the kind of people they were.
And so that was that. No more trekking up the range for Easter in Toowoomba. No more sipping chai in the YWAM tent. No more running to try and get the best position in the mosh pit at main stage. Easterfest was done. The festival might have finished up, but that didn't stop the demand for live Christian music in southeast Queensland. Over the past few years, 96.5 has presented a number of shows from international artists including Wren Collective, Riley Clemens, Jeremy Camp and We Are Messengers, all sellouts. This culminated last year with For King and Country's Homecoming Tour, when 10,000 fans filled the Brisbane Entertainment Centre to see the premier act in Christian music.
This is the last show of the tour tonight. It's called the Homecoming Tour, and it really feels like we've come home, family. Thank you for being here. We got relatives here tonight.
So the obvious question is, if 10,000 fans can fill the Brisbane Entertainment Centre, could Easterfest be resurrected? Could there be a new festival, an Easterfest 2.0 if you like, rise up for a new generation? With that Creative Australia report finding that genre-specific festivals are still thriving, is there space for another Christian music festival? Tony Moore, who was involved in the production side of Easterfest for many years, thinks so, and along with Sunshine Coast businessman Jason Holmes, has been thinking about what a new festival could look like.
We've had some serious minds, put to the task of working out what has happened, what needs to change, what state are we in at this moment. And there's probably a factor that we have to kind of work out is that it's a different group of people at the moment who are in that space. If you go back 20 years or even 15 years, we were all in a different space then, but we're also a different group of people. And at that time, we didn't have the social media that we have now, where it's a big distraction for people. They look at something for 3 seconds and go, I'm over that, I'm over that, I'm over that. And they're not community in the sense of the community is actually on their device almost. You know what I mean? So connecting physically is a little bit odd for this generation, but it can be changed. The Bible says in the hearts of the fathers return, and, of the children back to the fathers. And that is the time that we're coming into. And I won't say revive, because I don't believe Easterfest should be revived. I think the next version of Easterfest, or that kind of thing, a unity movement, will come. But obviously with any kind of festival and Easterfest, their outgoings, their costs to produce the product, and I don't hate to use the word product, but the venue, let's just say that, the cost to actually set it all up, you're bringing in a micro city, toilets, electricity, security, that is insanely expensive. So before you can even turn a profit, you've got to recoup those costs. What's required again is a hunger. You also need financial backing. You need a venue or a place for it to be. And we've often toyed with the idea of, like Jace Holmes, he has a production company. We have the means to do things that on a leaner basis, but there is still cost savings that we could have by maybe a world festival happens, and then in the week before or after, we roll in with our festival. So the infrastructure is already in place. And that way costs are lowered, which means the price is cheaper, so we can keep it going. But I actually also think that it really needs to be a buy-in from the people who really want it now. So one of my thoughts is that it almost needs to be crowd-funded by those who want it. Because if you have ownership over something, you will fight to keep it. It's like anything. If you got something of value, you're going to work hard to protect it and to increase its value. Whereas if it's just something over there and I'll turn up and I won't turn up, it'll just fall and flop, and it loses its value and the draw card to them, which is actually joining together with like-minded people, sharing life, and whether it's around a guitar on I won't say an open fire because you're not meant to have any in the park, or it's listening to a band, or it's just hanging out having coffee or eating those huge donut things that were there that kept us going those late nights. It doesn't matter as long as we're hanging out together, much like a family, just hanging together and sharing in something that we all value greatly. So I do think there is something there to be had. I think we need to think seriously about how to do it. Don't forget local musicians, local bands, and I think there's a whole new generation that we need to involve, the ones who are probably would just sit on the outside, but they've got something really great to contribute now, because that's the generation that can connect with their generation. And unless that generation is involved, we're just throwing effort into the breeze, because it's going to be very hard to connect with a generation that we don't really speak to.
Ali Margart is an event coordinator with Christian Media and Arts Australia and is looking at the feasibility of a Christian music festival for the Gold Coast.
A couple of years ago, pre-pandemic, God placed on my heart to bring a Christian music festival to the Gold Coast. So there was a lot of heart and thought and research and everything like that went into starting off that journey, to the point where I went and searched all throughout America and found which festival sort of aligned with what I saw God had given me. I found Unity Christian Music Festival up in Muskegon in Michigan, reached out to their festival director, and he's a wonderful guy with a great team. And I was actually unexpectedly blessed by the taxation department that year. So I used that money to go over and serve at Unity Christian Music Festival. I flew for 33 hours, got off the plane and served for 3 days straight. And it was the best experience. I served in every facet of that event, and I've loved every minute of it. The team over there have been really supportive. Even up until this day, they're really supportive about giving me templates and trying to encourage and help. And obviously being on another continent, it's a little bit of a different scenario, running something like that in Australia, but really has come alongside, which has been really wonderful.
Despite the obvious demand for international acts, especially in southeast Queensland, Ali says the plan would be to go down the same path as AGMF and Easterfest, starting with Australian acts and then building.
We have such great homegrown talent here. By all means, I would love to eventually get international acts out here, but I actually feel quite drawn to the fact that let's start with the Aussies. Let's actually get it running, get it happening with the Australians, and then we can sort of work with bringing some internationals in. I am so excited by the fact that Queensland has outpaced every single state when it comes to bringing touring Christian artists to Australia. So I'm very involved in that tour process with what I do at CMAA, and every time Brisbane smashes the other states. So we're beating Sydney, we're beating Melbourne. And I just find that so invigorating to go, wow, Queensland, there's really something here. We are so hungry for it. So that's another reason why I feel really rejuvenated about this whole experience, because I look at it and go, there's something here. God's doing something in this space.
Ali also sees her festival in a similar vein to Easterfest, providing Australian artists an opportunity to step up and take their music to an international audience.
I feel very strongly that it's actually, there's a resurgence coming. There's rejuvenation. There's hope, I guess you could say. I feel like, whilst I'm not a musician myself, like you said, I do have contact with a number of them, and there's excitement. There's good things coming, and I feel like there's more people getting into that space. And whilst people might think some of the touring Christian artists coming from, say, America, we've got great ones here, why aren't we supporting those? These Christian storytellers coming over from other countries are actually really encouraging Australian Christian storytellers, Australian artists, Australian musicians to actually push themselves a little bit more, going, wow, okay, I could do this. I could do something like this. So it's actually, I feel like it's actually bringing more Christian musicians into the sphere of performing, which is what we actually want to see. So I'm really excited by the next couple of years to see how Christian music in Australia is actually reframed.
I hope you've enjoyed taking this trip down memory lane to what will be, for so many people, the best time of their lives. If you want to continue reliving the Easterfest experience, we've created a special playlist on Spotify, crammed full of Easterfest and AGMF artists from that initial event in 1999, all the way through to the final festival in 2015. You'll find the link to that playlist in the show notes. If you've enjoyed the podcast, hit us up with a 5-star rating and leave us a review with your favourite Easterfest memory. Your ratings and reviews will help other people find the podcast. Over the next few weeks, we'll also be releasing some special bonus episodes and full interviews, so make sure you've hit like, subscribe, or follow in your podcast app so you get notified when these episodes are available. The Easterfest story was made up of thousands of people's stories, and at its heart, the Toowoomba experience was about community. Whether you were a volunteer, played in a band, or simply came to enjoy the show, the festival was about more than just music. It was a place to be with your people. Thank you to everyone who gave their time to be interviewed for this series, but a huge shout out to the Easterfest crew of Isaac Moody, Linda Monteith and Dave Schenk. I'm going to give the final word to Isaac, who was there at the very beginning in the late 90s, to reflect on how he would sum up the almost 2 decades that the Easterfest era covered. I'm Justin Rouillon. Thanks for listening.
I'm always reminded, God's word, where there's unity, there the Lord commands a blessing. And if I look at any of the great things happening around the world in Christian space, so often behind the scenes is people in unity really serving together. And that's really the Toowoomba story. And that created, in a small little country town like Toowoomba, the biggest Christian event Australia's ever seen, happening annually. And that's the story. It's just a bunch of very ordinary people saying, hey, we'll work together, we'll pray for our city, we'll engage with the broader society. Chamber of Commerce, Toowoomba Regional Council, the Queensland Police all came on board. And the next thing is you've got 40,000 people participating in that. I think it's where there's unity, there the Lord commands a blessing.
The Rise and Fall of Easterfest is a production of Brisbane's 96.5. To find more podcasts like this, search for 96FIVE in your podcast app, or click on podcasts at 96five.com.